The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of Redstone Valley, casting long shadows across the sprawling Barrow Ranch. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by the soft golden light as horses shifted restlessly in the paddocks and the distant river murmured its familiar song. At the center of it all stood Silas Barrow, the richest and most influential rancher in the county, a man whose presence alone seemed to command respect. Silas was tall and broad-shouldered, with a sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to measure the worth of a person in a single glance. He had everything a man could want: wealth, land, power, but there was one thing the townsfolk whispered he had yet to find: a woman worthy of his heart. Meanwhile, not far from the ranch lived the Hartley sisters, who had become something of a curiosity in the small town of Redstone. The elder sister, Clara, was strikingly beautiful. Her golden hair fell in perfect waves, and her bright blue eyes seemed to capture the sun itself. Every time she walked through the town square, she drew admiring glances and whispered compliments, and she carried herself with an easy confidence, knowing full well the effect she had on men. It was widely assumed that Silas Barrow, with all his wealth and status, would inevitably fall for Clara's charms. Her younger sister, Lila, was a different story. Small in stature, with plain brown hair and quiet green eyes, she often faded into the background. Lila was not one to boast, nor did she seek attention. She preferred books, long walks through the woods, and the company of the animals she loved to tend. People often overlooked her, dismissing her as ordinary, and even Clara seemed unaware of the hidden depth in her sister's character. Yet Lila possessed a subtle strength, a keen intelligence, and a heart generous enough to notice the small sorrows and joys of those around her. These were qualities few could see at a glance, and fewer still valued. On this particular morning, the sisters arrived at the ranch under the pretense of visiting for business, a small batch of fine linens. Clara had promised to deliver to the Barrow estate, but both were aware that this visit was more than routine. Clara's eyes sparkled with the thrill of anticipation, imagining the look Silas might give her, confident that he would be captivated immediately. Lila, however, moved quietly, feeling a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, her gaze occasionally drawn to the vast open fields and the sturdy ranch buildings that spoke of a man accustomed to hard work and responsibility. As the sisters approached the main house, the ranch dogs barked in recognition, bounding toward them with friendly enthusiasm. Silas emerged from the wide porch, wiping his hands on a cloth, and his gaze swept across the two sisters. He paused briefly on Clara, as any man might, noting her undeniable beauty, but then his eyes lingered slightly on Lila, perhaps because of her quiet composure with the subtle way she observed everything around her. In that instant, something shifted, though neither sister could yet define it. The townsfolk often spoke of the Barrow Ranch as a place of wealth and authority, but it was also a place where character mattered more than appearances, and where a person's actions revealed their true worth. Little did anyone suspect that in the coming days this very setting would set the stage for a choice that would defy expectations, challenge assumptions, and ultimately show that beauty alone was never enough to win a heart as discerning as Silas Barrow's. The late morning sun hung high over the Barrow Ranch, casting shimmering heat over the golden fields. Inside the wide, oak-beamed main house, the atmosphere was a curious mixture of routine and anticipation. Silas Barrow, ever meticulous, moved with calm efficiency, inspecting accounts and ensuring the ranch operations were running smoothly. Despite the mundane nature of the work, there was a subtle tension in the air, an unspoken sense that today would be unlike any other. It arrived with the sound of hooves crunching the gravel driveway. Clara and Lila Hartley approached, the elder sister walking with confident elegance, her dress swishing perfectly over her boots, her posture flawless. She carried herself as if every eye in the county were already on her, as if the world revolved around her charm. Lila, trailing slightly behind, adjusted the strap of her modest bag and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She was quieter, moving with a kind of unassuming grace, eyes open to every detail of the ranch, the fences, the grazing cattle, the scent of hay in the air. Silas emerged onto the porch just as the sisters reached the steps. Clara's heart leapt. She had long imagined this moment, expecting his gaze to linger on her, impressed by her beauty. And for a moment it did, but only in the way he might note a painting hanging on a wall. His eyes quickly moved, almost imperceptibly, to Lila. There was no sudden spark of romance, but rather a quiet curiosity. She was not dazzling in appearance, nor did she demand attention, but there was a stillness about her that suggested awareness, intelligence, and something more. "Good morning," Silas said, his deep voice steady, neither warm nor cold, merely observant. Clara's lips curved into a practiced, radiant smile. "Good morning, Mr. Barrow," she said, her tone lilting with charm. "I hope we are not intruding." She stepped forward, clearly expecting him to respond with admiration or flattery. "Not at all," Silas replied, tipping his hat slightly. Then his gaze shifted to Lila, who gave a small nod and managed a soft, polite smile. Unlike her sister, she did not try to dazzle him. Yet in that quiet acknowledgment there was an honesty that caught his attention, a subtle grace that Clara's overt confidence could not replicate. The sisters entered the house, and Clara began immediately with polite chatter, discussing linens, the town, and the inevitable compliments about the ranch. Silas listened, nodding occasionally, but his attention would wander, drawn back to the smaller details, the way Lila's fingers traced the edge of a wooden table, the way she observed the horses in the yard through the window, noting their temperament and health. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to Silas it marked the difference between appearance and essence. They moved into the sunlit parlor, where Clara tried to impress with stories of social events and fashionable trends. Lila, meanwhile, asked thoughtful questions about the ranch operations, about the challenges of managing livestock and land. Her questions were simple but intelligent, showing genuine curiosity rather than pretense. Silas found himself answering her carefully, surprised at how much he enjoyed the conversation. There was a spark of recognition in her eyes, not the kind fueled by flattery, but by understanding. By the time the visit concluded, Clara was confident she had made the strongest impression, while Lila felt a quiet pride in having been noticed for who she truly was. Silas walked them to the door, nodding politely to Clara but offering Lila a small, private comment, a word of encouragement, a thoughtful question, or even just a knowing smile. It was subtle, almost invisible to the casual observer, yet it carried weight. As the sisters rode away, the town gossip would later recall that Clara's beauty seemed undeniable, but Silas Barrow had noticed something far more compelling. And in that unnoticed detail, a seed was planted, one that would grow into a bond no one, not even Clara, could foresee. Redstone Valley had long been a place of routine, where the rhythm of life followed the rise and fall of the sun, the gentle sway of the cattle, and the quiet whisper of the river. But one late afternoon, the calm was shattered. Dark clouds rolled in suddenly from the west, swallowing the horizon in a thick, ominous blanket. The wind picked up sharply, whipping through the fields and rattling the fences. Silas Barrow, ever vigilant, immediately recognized the danger, a fast-moving storm that could threaten the livestock and damage the barns. The ranch hands scrambled to secure gates and bring animals to safety, their voices raised over the howling wind. Clara Hartley, visiting the ranch again, was quick to notice the chaos. Her first instinct, however, was panic. She fretted over the destruction the storm might cause to the manor, the linen she had brought, and even her perfectly styled hair, her blue eyes wide with alarm. She flitted from room to room, attempting to be helpful but accomplishing little, more concerned with appearances than the work at hand. Lila, in contrast, moved with calm efficiency. She sprang into action, guiding the younger calves toward the shelter of the barns, securing loose gates and assisting the ranch hands in managing the livestock. When the wind threatened to topple a stack of hay bales, she lifted them with a strength and decisiveness that drew the admiration of even the burlest ranch hands. Her actions were deliberate, composed, and fearless. Silas watched closely, feeling a deep sense of respect for her courage under pressure. At one point, a frightened moray bolted, tangled in its reins near the edge of the paddock. Clara gasped and shrank back, uncertain how to help. Lila ran to the animal, speaking in a steady, soothing voice. With careful hands, she untangled the reins and led the horse safely into the barn. Silas, observing from a distance, could not help but be impressed. Lila's poise under pressure, her ability to act decisively while maintaining compassion, set her apart in a way that no beauty or charm ever could. Meanwhile, the storm intensified, and the town's outskirts were not spared. A small river began to swell, threatening nearby homes and farmland. Lila suggested a plan to coordinate with the ranch hands and local neighbors, prioritizing the safety of the most vulnerable animals and property. Her ideas were practical, well-considered, and clearly articulated. Silas found himself relying on her judgments, quietly valuing her insight over the frantic energy of others. Clara, meanwhile, continued to fluster and fret, offering suggestions based on instinct rather than practicality, which often had to be corrected or redirected by Silas or the ranch hands. By the time the storm passed, the ranch had survived with minimal damage. The Barrow estate remained intact, the livestock safe, and the community felt grateful for the quick thinking of those who had led the response. Silas's thoughts, however, lingered not on the saved property, but on the sisters themselves. The stark contrast between them was impossible to ignore. Clara's beauty and social grace had done little to mitigate the crisis, while Lila's quiet determination and practical courage had proven invaluable. That evening, as the sun broke through the clouds and painted the fields in a golden glow, Silas walked with Lila to inspect the ranch grounds. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and hay, and the soft hum of recovery filled the quiet spaces between them. Lila spoke humbly, downplaying her role, but Silas could see the pride in her eyes, not born of vanity, but of genuine accomplishment. Clara, on the other hand, retreated to the house, exhausted by worry and unaccustomed to the demands of real responsibility. In that moment, Silas realized that beauty alone could not withstand life's trials. It was character, courage, and empathy, the quiet strength that Lila had displayed, that truly mattered. The storm had tested not just the ranch, but the hearts and qualities of those within it. And in the wake of that trial, one truth became undeniable. Lila Hartley had a spirit that could stand alongside his, a heart capable of understanding, enduring, and even challenging him in the ways that mattered most. In the days following the storm, the Barrow Ranch seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm. The cattle grazed peacefully once more, fences were repaired, and the river returned to its calm, familiar flow. Yet within this ordinary routine, tension simmered like a hidden ember. Clara Hartley, once confident of her inevitable victory in the race for Silas Barrow's attention, found her certainty slipping. The storm had revealed qualities in Lila that no charm, no perfect smile, and no gown could replicate. Clara's frustration grew in quiet, sharp bursts. She noticed the ranch hand speaking with a newfound respect to Lila, noting her quick thinking and composure. Even Silas, whose attention she had assumed was hers by right, seemed different. His glances lingered on Lila, his questions were directed toward her insights, and his conversations carried a weight that her superficial charm could notch. Every small acknowledgment he gave Lila felt like a slight, whether intended or not, and Clara's pride bristled. Her first attempts to regain dominance were subtle. She dressed more extravagantly during visits, her gowns brighter, her hair arranged with meticulous care. She used her social charm to interject herself into conversations, aiming to impress Silas with wit and humor. But each time he would politely acknowledge her words, yet his mind appeared elsewhere, observing, listening, and quietly valuing Lila's thoughtful responses over Clara's carefully rehearsed comments. Clara's attempts to shine felt increasingly hollow, like a candle flickering in the wind. Frustration turned to scheming. Clara began whispering to townsfolk, painting herself as the more suitable partner, implying that Layla was plain, naive, or incapable of handling the complexities of life alongside a man of Silas's stature. She tried to manipulate small situations, offering to organize events at the ranch, or taking credit for Layla's suggestions to maintain an image of superiority. Yet each move seemed only to highlight her superficiality. Layla's quiet competence shone brighter in contrast, and the townspeople started to notice. Clara's envy was fueled not only by Silas's attention, but by the subtle affection that seemed to grow between him and Lila. She saw the way he consulted Lila on ranch matters, the way he smiled when she suggested a solution, and the way he listened to her opinions with a seriousness that he never afforded her. Clara had assumed that beauty alone would win hearts, but Silas's actions defied expectation, challenging the very foundation of her confidence. In private, Clara's frustration sometimes spilled over into moments of vulnerability. She would pace her room, staring at her reflection, questioning why her beauty and social grace had not guaranteed success. Her mind churned with comparisons, imagining what Lila possessed that she did not. But the truth was simple and undeniable. Lila had something far rarer than charm. She had integrity, courage, empathy, and intelligence. Silas valued these qualities deeply, and no outward adornment could replace them. Desperation pushed Clara to bolder tactics. She tried to stage opportunities to display her courage, attempting to mirror Lila's composure, even volunteering for tasks beyond her usual comfort. But these efforts felt forced and hollow, lacking the authenticity that Silas recognized in Lila. Every action, every word was measured and artificial, and Silas saw through it instantly. Where Lila acted naturally, Clara performed. Where Lila inspired trust, Clara demanded attention. The distinction could not have been clearer. By the end of the week, Clara's schemes had only deepened her own frustration, highlighting the gap between appearance and substance. The storm, the ranch tasks, and Silas's observations had shifted the balance. Clara remained beautiful, yes, but her beauty now seemed almost irrelevant in the face of genuine character. Meanwhile, Layla's quiet strength, her selfless courage, and her thoughtful intelligence had firmly established her place not only in Silas's mind, but in the hearts of the people around her. Clara would soon realize that winning over a man like Silas Barrow required more than looks. It required a heart capable of standing beside him in every trial. And as the gap between the sisters grew, the stage was set for choices, revelations, and ultimately, the moment when true love would defy expectation. The town of Redstone was small, its streets dusty and narrow, its buildings modest but sturdy. In such a place, news traveled fast, and every glance, every whispered comment was magnified. By the afternoon of the Hartley sisters' visit to the Barrow Ranch, the town was already buzzing with speculation. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone believed the outcome was obvious. Silas Barrow, with all his wealth and influence, would naturally choose Clara, the elder sister. After all, she was stunning, poised, and accustomed to attention. Who could resist her charm? Clara herself basked in the excitement. She knew the way heads turned when she walked down Main Street, how men tipped their hats, and how women whispered behind delicate fans. To her, the idea of Silas noticing anyone else was almost laughable. She allowed herself small moments of indulgence, imagining the life that awaited her once the town officially recognized her as his chosen one. Her thoughts often lingered on Silas's presence at the ranch, replaying his polite nod, his courteous smile, and assuming, of course, that admiration had passed her way. Lila, by contrast, felt the weight of obscurity. While Clara moved with confidence, she could feel the town's gaze sliding past her, noting her plainness and quiet demeanor. Yet beneath her apparent meekness was a resilience that she rarely allowed herself to display openly. Lila had grown accustomed to being underestimated, and though it stung to see her sister celebrated, she knew that outward beauty was only part of the story. She observed Clara's vanity and social ease with a mixture of amusement and quiet concern, sensing that charm alone did not equate to worth or substance. By late afternoon, whispers in the general store and on the porches of homes began to focus on the rancher's visit. "Did you see how Silas looked at the girls?" one woman asked, her bonnet tilted slightly. "Of course he must be taken with Clara," another replied, her voice full of certainty. Even children noticed the tension, repeating snippets of adult conversation, their wide eyes reflecting the drama of a courtship they barely understood. The town was alive with anticipation, imagining dresses, dinners, and a future union between the most eligible rancher and the most beautiful girl. But Lila began to notice subtle differences too. Certain observant neighbors remarked quietly, there was something about the younger one. He lingered a little on her. At first, she dismissed it as wishful thinking or gossip. People said strange things all the time, but the idea took root. There was something in Silas Barrow that looked beyond appearances, something that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. Meanwhile, the tension between the sisters grew, though unspoken. Clara, confident in her presumed victory, began to view Layla as a minor inconvenience rather than a rival. She would toss casual, dismissive remarks or exaggerated gestures meant to highlight her superiority. Yet Lila remained composed. Instead of matching Clara's flamboyance, she focused on observing and understanding the world around her. Where Clara sought admiration, Layla sought meaning. Where Clara expected love to follow beauty, Lila quietly hoped it might follow character. The townsfolk, oblivious to these subtle dynamics, continued to speculate. Every small interaction, every smile, every glance between Silas and the sisters was dissected and analyzed. By nightfall, the gossip had reached the town saloon, where men and women argued passionately over which sister he would choose. Clara's friends openly mocked Lila's plainness, while Lila's few allies defended her virtues. The contrast was glaring, yet unnoticed by most. The competition was between superficial allure and quiet substance, a battle only Silas could judge fairly. As the day ended and the sisters returned home, the stage was set. The rivalry had begun, fueled by pride, gossip, and expectation. Yet beneath the surface, Lila's quiet strength and integrity had already begun to plant seeds of intrigue in Silas's mind, seeds that would grow into something far deeper than the town could imagine. And Clara, for all her beauty, had no idea that the story was no longer entirely hers to tell. The days that followed the Hartley sisters' visit to Barrow Ranch were filled with quiet observation and subtle revelations. Silas Barrow was a man of routine, disciplined in both his work and his judgments. He prided himself on understanding people, not merely judging them by appearances, but by actions, decisions, and integrity. While townsfolk assumed the choice of a bride would hinge on beauty, Silas knew that character, courage, and loyalty were far more enduring measures of a person. Over the course of a week, the sisters visited again, this time to assist with small tasks around the ranch. Clara, ever aware of her social power, moved with elegance and grace, offering advice and opinions on matters she did not fully understand. She adorned herself in fine clothes, positioning herself in ways she believed would draw attention. Silas noted her beauty, of course. Any man could not help but see it. But as he watched, he also saw impatience, a touch of vanity, and a tendency to prioritize appearances over substance. She spoke often of what others would think, or how events would appear, rather than focusing on the task at hand. Lila, in contrast, was quiet and attentive. She helped feed the animals, noticing when a horse seemed uneasy or a cow was unwell. She asked questions, listened carefully, and acted decisively when needed. One afternoon, a young colt grew restless and slipped in the stable. Clara recoiled, unsure of what to do, but Layla was instantly at its side, steadying the frightened animal and calming the situation with a gentle voice and confident hands. Silas observed, noting how Layla's intelligence and composure translated into real-world action. It was not flashy, nor did it demand attention, but it was genuine. Silas also watched how each sister interacted with the ranch hands and townsfolk who visited the property. Clara, though polite, often displayed condescension or impatience with the less educated staff. Lila, however, spoke kindly to everyone, asking questions about their work, listening to their concerns, and even offering thoughtful suggestions when appropriate. Her humility was not weakness. It was strength disguised as quiet modesty. The ranch hands, usually reserved and wary of outsiders, began to warm toward her in ways they never did with Clara. During a particularly hot afternoon, a storm rolled in suddenly, darkening the skies and sending gusts of wind across the open fields. Silas moved quickly to secure the livestock, directing the ranch hands as thunder rumbled overhead. Clara panicked slightly, fussing over minor details and fretting over the inconvenience. Lila, meanwhile, took initiative guiding the animals to safety, ensuring gates were latched and helping others carry out Silas's instructions efficiently. Her actions were precise, thoughtful, and courageous, reflecting an inner strength that Silas could not ignore. By the end of that day, Silas began to realize what he had instinctively felt during the first visit. There was more to Lila than met the eye. While Clara's beauty was striking, it was fragile in the face of real challenge. Lila's quiet resilience, her empathy, and her intelligence revealed layers of character that were rare and profoundly compelling. Silas understood that these qualities would sustain a partnership through hardship, joy, and the inevitable trials of life on the ranch. The contrast between the sisters became increasingly clear to Silas. Where Clara relied on her charm, Layla demonstrated substance. Where Clara sought attention, Lila fostered understanding. And where Clara expected admiration, Layla earned respect. It was not the flashy gestures or the compliments of the town that mattered. It was the quiet, steady demonstration of integrity and heart that left a lasting impression. By the time the sisters departed that week, Silas knew, without fully admitting it to anyone, including himself, that the seed of a bond had already been planted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. The town's expectations, the gossip, the assumptions of beauty and desirability, all of it was irrelevant to him now. In the eyes and actions of the younger sister, he had glimpsed a kind of depth and courage that no superficial charm could match. And for the first time, Silas felt that his heart might be swayed not by appearances, but by the essence of a person's true self. After the storm and the display of courage at the ranch, the dynamics between Silas Barrow and Lila Hartley began to shift in subtle, profound ways. Whereas previously he had only observed her with quiet curiosity, he now found himself seeking her counsel and cherishing the moments they shared together. It was not a bold, sweeping romance marked by declarations of love, but a quiet, steady connection that deepened with every conversation, every shared task, and every glance that lingered a little longer than necessary. Lila, for her part, remained cautious. She had always been aware of Silas's reputation, the wealth, the power, the attention he commanded, and she knew the town's eyes were upon them. But she also felt something she had never experienced before, a sense of being truly seen, valued for her thoughts, her judgment, and the steady strength that she carried quietly within. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Her heart would quicken when Silas would pause to listen to her ideas on the ranch, or when he sought her help in matters that required both practicality and insight. These moments were small, almost imperceptible, yet they left lasting impressions, forming a bridge between two very different lives. They began spending more time together in ways that were neither rushed nor pressured. Early mornings were spent inspecting the fences and checking on the livestock where they worked side by side. Silas would offer occasional guidance, but Lila's keen observations and thoughtful suggestions often improved the plans. She noticed details others overlooked: an uneven fence post, the subtle signs of illness in a calf, or the way the wind could affect the haystacks. Silas came to rely on her input, and he respected her judgments in ways he did not with many others. During breaks, they would sit on the porch or by the river, sharing quiet conversation. Silas asked questions not out of idle curiosity, but out of genuine interest. Lila, for the first time, felt her opinions truly mattered. They spoke about more than ranching: the beauty of the valley, memories of childhood, and their hopes for the future. Each conversation revealed facets of their characters that drew them closer. Silas admired Lila's empathy, her ability to see others' needs and act without self-interest. Lila admired Silas's unwavering dedication to his land and his people, his sense of responsibility tempered with a fairness that earned respect rather than fear. There were small, tender gestures that marked the beginnings of intimacy. Silas would brush a stray lock of hair from Lila's face when a gust of wind threatened her comfort, offer her a warm hand when the morning air was biting, or pause to ensure she was safe when handling the more unpredictable animals. Lila, in return, began to notice the quiet strength in his presence, the protective instincts beneath his sometimes gruff exterior, and the rare moments when his eyes would soften in her presence. These exchanges were never dramatic, but they carried a weight of trust and burgeoning affection that neither could ignore. The town continued its gossip, of course, but Lila learned to ignore it. She no longer measured her worth against her sister's beauty or the expectations of others. Silas's respect and attentiveness showed her that value was found in integrity, courage, and kindness, the very qualities she had long nurtured quietly. Clara, oblivious to the depth of this developing bond, continued to pursue admiration through superficial means, unaware that she was losing ground in a way no amount of beauty could rectify. By the end of the week, the connection between Silas and Lila had grown undeniable. It was a quiet, patient unfolding, built on shared experiences and mutual respect rather than declarations or spectacle. Silas found himself thinking of Lila in ways he never had of any other woman, appreciating her not just for what she did, but for who she was. And Lila, feeling the stirrings of affection she had long kept subdued, began to understand that this was something different from fleeting attention. It was a partnership grounded in recognition, understanding, and the kind of admiration that lasted beyond appearances. In this way, a subtle but unshakable bond took root, one that would ultimately challenge the assumptions of the town, confront the pride of Clara, and demonstrate that love founded on character was far more enduring than love based on beauty alone. The town of Redstone had been alive with speculation for weeks, every whisper and glance feeding the rumor mill. The Hartley sisters' rivalry was no secret, and the townsfolk were eager for the inevitable moment when Silas Barrow, the richest and most respected rancher in the county, would finally make his intentions clear. Few dared to imagine anything beyond Clara's beauty securing his favor. After all, she was stunning, poised, and confident, a woman seemingly born to command admiration. Yet in Silas's mind, the truth had long taken root. His heart had quietly leaned toward Lila, the younger sister whose courage, intelligence, and empathy shone brighter than any outward adornment. The opportunity to reveal his choice came at the annual Redstone Harvest Festival, a lively event where townsfolk gathered to celebrate the season's bounty. The square was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of roasted meats and fresh pies. Silas had chosen the setting deliberately. It was public enough to demonstrate his resolve, yet informal enough to reflect the sincerity of his decision. The stage was set not for spectacle, but for truth. Clara, dressed in a flowing gown of deep sapphire, floated through the festival with practiced grace. She smiled at familiar faces, exchanged pleasantries, and allowed the town to witness her elegance. In her mind, the moment of triumph was imminent. She assumed Silas would inevitably approach her, declaring admiration, and finally acknowledging her as the woman destined to be by his side. Yet beneath her confidence, a subtle unease had begun to stir. Small glances between Silas and Lila had not gone unnoticed. Lila, in a simple dress that allowed ease of movement, moved quietly through the festival, helping a child steady a fallen pumpkin and chatting with the townsfolk about their harvests. She did not seek attention, yet her presence drew genuine smiles and gratitude. Silas watched from a distance, noting the ease and warmth with which she interacted. His decision had already been made in the quiet moments on the ranch, but this was the first time he would declare it publicly. When the time felt right, Silas approached the center of the festival square. His broad shoulders and commanding presence drew the crowd's attention. A hush fell over the gathering as he raised his hand to speak. "People of Redstone," he began, his voice carrying clearly, "I know there has been much speculation about matters of the heart, and I know many expect me to choose based on appearances or charm. But I have learned that true worth is not always what the eye can see." He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze settled on Lila, who met his eyes with quiet composure. "I have come to know two remarkable sisters," he continued. "One is beautiful, graceful, and admired by all, which she undoubtedly deserves. The other is wise, courageous, and compassionate in ways that cannot be measured by looks alone. It is to her that I give my heart." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Clara's eyes widened, her hand rising to her mouth in disbelief. Lila felt her cheeks flush with surprise and nervousness, but she also felt a deep, unspoken joy. Silas stepped forward, extending his hand to her, a simple gesture that carried the weight of truth, admiration, and trust. She accepted, her fingers brushing against his, sealing a bond that had been formed in the quiet, unseen moments of everyday life. The reaction of the townsfolk was immediate and mixed. Some whispered in astonishment, struggling to reconcile expectations with reality. Others nodded in approval, recognizing the wisdom of Silas's choice. Clara, however, was struck dumb, her pride wounded and her plans unraveling. The stunning display of beauty she had relied on could not compete with the substance and heart that Lila possessed. In that moment, Silas and Lila's partnership was no longer private, it was recognized, respected, and celebrated. It was a declaration not only of affection, but of a principle. Love guided by character and integrity always outweighs beauty alone. Clara, though shocked, could see the truth in her sister's quiet strength. And even she would have to reckon with the reality that some things could not be won by charm or vanity. In the aftermath of Silas Barrow's public declaration, Redstone Valley was abuzz with reaction. The townsfolk continued to gossip, speculating about the choices, the sisters, and the reasons behind such a surprising turn of events. Yet amidst the chatter, the true emotional fallout was quieter, more personal. Centered on Clara Hartley, whose pride and assumptions had been deeply challenged, and on Lila, who was still coming to terms with the enormity of the attention and affection she had earned. Clara's frustration quickly gave way to a storm of emotions. Shock and disbelief were her first responses, followed by anger, and then a bitter sting of inadequacy. She had assumed that her beauty, charm, and confidence would automatically secure Silas's admiration. Yet here was Lila, quiet, unassuming, and now celebrated by the man Clara had long considered a prize. She struggled to reconcile this unexpected outcome with her understanding of the world, a world where she believed that appearances determined worth. Her first reaction was one of confrontation. Clara sought private moments with Lila, attempting to assert her superiority, to undermine her sister's confidence, or to demand an explanation for how she had managed to capture Silas's attention. Lila, however, remained composed. She did not gloat or belittle her sister, but spoke with calm honesty. She explained that love was not a matter of beauty or show, but of understanding, respect, courage, and shared values. Her words were not meant to wound, but to illuminate a truth Clara had yet to grasp, that substance outlasts surface, and that character, not appearance, defines lasting bonds. Clara's anger and pride slowly softened, replaced by reflection and a grudging respect. She began to see that her efforts to manipulate events and draw attention to herself had been superficial, fleeting, and ultimately ineffectual. In Lila's quiet courage, her empathy, and her intelligence, Clara recognized qualities she admired, even if she had once envied them. This recognition did not erase her disappointment, but it marked the beginning of emotional growth, a realization that worth and admiration could not be forced, and that genuine love must be earned through authenticity. For Lila, the resolution was equally profound, but in a different way. She had always been modest and self-effacing, but the events with Silas and the storm had revealed her own inner strength. Being chosen and respected for who she truly was validated the qualities she had long overlooked in herself. It was a moment of empowerment, a reassurance that quiet courage and steadfastness could inspire deep admiration even in the most discerning hearts. Lila's humility remained, but now it was paired with confidence, a recognition of her own worth that did not depend on anyone's approval, yet was acknowledged by the man she loved. Silas, observing both sisters, felt a sense of relief and affirmation. His choice, though unexpected to the town, had been guided by clarity of heart and reason. He knew that Layla's patience, intelligence, and courage would sustain their partnership in ways that beauty alone never could. He also understood that Clara's moment of reckoning was necessary, a chance for her to confront her assumptions and grow in character. The experience, he hoped, would teach her that life and love are rarely won through superficiality, and that true fulfillment comes from understanding, empathy, and courage. As the tension eased, the town gradually accepted the reality of Silas and Lila's partnership. Even those who had doubted or criticized came to recognize the wisdom in his choice. The sisters, once defined by rivalry and comparison, began to find a new equilibrium. Clara, though still processing her disappointment, started to redirect her energy towards self-improvement and meaningful pursuits, while Lila embraced the life she had earned through her quiet strength. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the storm of conflict had passed, leaving behind clarity, growth, and affirmation. Silas and Lila's love was no longer fragile or uncertain. It had been tested by observation, trial, and comparison, and had emerged strong. The sisters' relationship, though changed, also found a tentative harmony, rooted in understanding and respect rather than envy. In Redstone Valley, it became clear that love guided by integrity, courage, and empathy could withstand both scrutiny and expectation, and that true worth, once recognized, could never be undone. The months following the Harvest Festival in Redstone Valley brought a renewed sense of calm and harmony to the Barrow Ranch and the surrounding town. Silas and Lila's bond, once quiet and tentative, had grown into a partnership marked by mutual respect, understanding, and love. Their relationship was not one built on spectacle or fleeting admiration. but on shared experiences, values, and the recognition of each other's character. Where once the town had assumed that beauty alone would determine Silas's choice, they now witnessed a love grounded in depth, substance, and trust. Lila adapted seamlessly to life alongside Silas, not by changing herself, but by bringing her inherent qualities, wisdom, courage, patience, and empathy to their shared world. She engaged fully with the ranch's operations, offering insight, encouragement, and steady support. Silas, in turn, treated her as an equal partner, valuing her judgments and relying on her presence not only for companionship, but for guidance and reassurance. Their days were filled with small routines that carried quiet joy, tending to livestock, planting seasonal crops, and sharing early morning walks across the rolling fields. In these simple acts, the foundation of enduring love was cemented. The townsfolk gradually accepted the unexpected pairing, their initial shock giving way to admiration. They had observed Silas's careful deliberation, Lila's strength of character, and the depth of their connection, and they could not deny that it was the right match. Children would sometimes follow Lila in the fields, eager to hear her gentle instructions and learn from her example, while neighbors sought her counsel in ways they had never trusted Clara to provide. In time, even Clara began to witness the stability, respect, and happiness in her sister's life, a contrast to the transient admiration her beauty alone had once commanded. Clara's growth became an essential part of the story's resolution. Though initially bitter and envious, she gradually came to recognize the importance of substance over appearance. She observed that Layla's worth was not contingent on flattery or gossip, but on actions and integrity. Clara redirected her energy toward personal development and meaningful pursuits, learning humility and self-awareness along the way. Their relationship, once defined by rivalry, transformed into one marked by understanding and cautious camaraderie. While the sisters were different, they came to appreciate the qualities that each brought to the world around them. For Silas, the lesson was clear and deeply satisfying. True love and partnership could not be won through charm, appearance, or superficial allure. They required patience, insight, and the ability to recognize and honor the unseen strengths in another. Lila had proven herself in small, quiet moments, in acts of courage and thoughtfulness, and it was these qualities that had drawn him to her. Their love was now a testament to the idea that character not looks endures, strengthens, and inspires. The moral of their story became evident to everyone who observed them. In Redstone Valley, the tale of Silas and Lila was retold not as a story of beauty triumphing, but of wisdom, integrity, and courage prevailing. It reminded the townsfolk that appearances could be deceiving, that pride could mislead, and that the quiet, steadfast qualities of the heart were the truest markers of worth. Love that recognizes and cherishes these qualities is enduring, resilient, and fulfilling in a way that beauty alone could never achieve. As the sun set over the Barrow Ranch, casting a warm, golden glow over the fields and hills, Silas and Lila walked together along the familiar paths. The horses grazed peacefully, the river whispered its gentle song, and the world felt ordered and right. They spoke little, for words were unnecessary. Their connection was evident in the ease of their steps, the small touches of affection, and the shared understanding that they were partners in every sense. The story of a wealthy rancher rejecting superficial beauty for the quiet strength of a woman no one else dared to see had reached its conclusion, leaving behind love, growth, and a lesson that would endure far longer than any fleeting admiration of the eye. In the end, it was not the spectacle, but the substance, that triumphed, and in this, Redstone Valley witnessed a love story worth remembering for generations.